found the best place in my flat to film, but it is a little bit of a bare wall, so I might need to sort that out. January was a super amazing reading month for me. I think I read like 12 and a half books. The first book I read this month, and it was on the 1st of January on a train journey, is The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling. I really enjoyed contrasting this book with the film because there are quite a lot of differences, particularly the character of Baloo. He left me with a much different impression than he does in the film. I read this for my children's literature module, which so far I have been really enjoying. It's always interesting to see what happens when a story is Disney-fied. I have a presentation to do on this in a couple weeks. It's only a practice one and it's not assessed, but even so, it's really good that I got this book out of the way early and I'm familiar with it. I just spilled my tea. So rather than going chronologically in the order I read the books in, I'm going to tell you about the rest of the books I read for that module so far. Next was Anne of Green Gables, which was the first book we were looking at, and I've just had my seminar on it and it was so good. I didn't read this book as a child and I fell in love with it when I read it. It's so amazing. Anne of Green Gables tells the story of a very, very talkative girl named Anne and what happens when she is adopted by an elderly brother and sister. Elderly is probably not... They're quite old to be considering getting a child. I find it really interesting how you see Anne's identity sculpted throughout the novel, and I think that's what I'm going to do my essay on. I asked my seminar tutor if I could do the essay on how femininity is constructed in the novel, and she's like, yeah, that'd be a great thing to do it on, so I'm very, very excited. And the book I read most recently for that module was The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. This tells the story of a girl named Mary who, after the death of her parents, is moved from a very privileged life in India to a also quite privileged life in England. Much like Anne of Green Gables, you see how the society around Mary shapes her as she grows up, and the relationship she forms with other children, particularly children of other backgrounds to her, are really interesting. I didn't enjoy this one as much as I enjoyed Anne of Green Gables, but nonetheless, it was a great read and I read it in like a day and I really quite enjoyed it. How nice the cover is. It is such a pretty cover and the spine is gorgeous. I don't know whether I should go on to more kids books or more course books. I think I'll do course books and then move back to kids books. So the next book I read for my course was Paradise Lost by John Milton. It was difficult, but I did it. Paradise Lost is an epic poem in which Milton retells the Christian creation story. Milton's sort of an anti-hero and he's kind of quite likeable in comparison to God, which was quite interesting. It was very difficult to get through and I don't know how positive I can be about it. I read the whole damn thing and then my seminar tutor was like, oh, do you know what bits you're supposed to read? And then he told us, oh, just focus on book 4 and book 9. The next book I read was for a module which is based on literature since 1945, and that is a play by Samuel Beckett called Waiting for Godot. This is a really interesting play, and I think it's one of those things that you'll either absolutely love or absolutely hate, and I really enjoyed it. This is a play of 2 acts in which characters named Vladimir and Estragon wait for Godot. Whatever or whoever Godot may be. It is about waiting and it is about humanity, and nothing much happens, and that means you can sort of push a lot of different readings onto it, so religious readings and political readings. It only takes maybe an hour and a half to read the whole thing, and I would definitely recommend it. The next 2 books I will pair together as they are part of the series of Unfortunate Events which I have been rereading, and that is book the 5th, The Austere Academy, and book the 6th, The Ersatz Elevator. I've always really enjoyed the narration of a series of Unfortunate Events, and I know people have mixed feelings on it, but I found reading them so close together did make the narration great, only slightly. So I will try distance out reading these more from now on. So what these 2 books have are learning more about the Quagmire triplets who are introduced in this book, and also VFD. I also read some YA books this month, including How to Be Bad, which has 3 authors, E. Lockhart, Lauren Myracle, and Sarah Mylynowski. I had quite mixed feelings on this book. I thought the characters were really interesting. You have Jessie, Vix, and Mel, and they are all very different people. Jessie is quite uptight and very religious. Vix is a seemingly very confident young woman, but has a lot of anxiety about her boyfriend who's just moved away to college. And Mel is the new girl in town who sort of fits the rich girl stereotype, but she is also very nervous about fitting in her new town. And these three girls go on a road trip together, and the book follows what they get up to. Something I did enjoy about this book was the fact they're a bit older than girls in YA normally are. I think these girls are probably around 18. I didn't think it was the most amazing, groundbreaking book that I've ever read, but nonetheless, it was a great book. Exactly what you'd expect from hotkey books. Whatever hotkey books publish is really, really great. I highly recommend anything that they put out there. Another YA book I read in January was The Fire Sermon by Francesca Haig. I barely remember reading this book. January seems like it was such a long month. I got so much done. So basically, The Fire Sermon is a post-apocalyptic novel in which everyone is born with a twin. I can't remember all the different names and terminology they have, but basically one of the twins is born with some sort of defect, whether it is something physical or something mental. And as soon as this manifests itself, this twin is removed from the family and we'll never see them again. And The Fire Sermon is sort of the beginning of that social structure beginning to break down. It's sort of like The Hunger Games meets The Road by Cormac McCarthy. There's quite a big twist at the end that I really didn't see coming, and I don't know why. Like, I kind of almost guessed it, but not quite. I was getting towards the end of the book and I was wondering how they were going to wrap it up, but then I realised it was part of like a trilogy, so don't know when I'm going to get around to finishing it off. And the next YA book I read, well, I think it's YA, was The Chimes by Anna Smaill. This book was absolutely gorgeous. The writing style in it was beautiful, and you can really tell that Anna Smaill was a poet before she was a novelist. Because of that, the prose can be quite difficult to keep up with sometimes, and I did find myself having to reread certain lines, but it was so beautiful nonetheless. The Chimes tells the story of a world in which memory no longer exists, and every day feels like the last one. There's no writing either, so there's no way of chronicling what has happened the day before. Memory and writing are music, and that's really the only thing that people have in this world, and music is so integral to the society. It's gorgeous. Although the main character, Simon, has a special gift and he wants to find out exactly what's going on and exactly what happened to his parents. The next book I read was The Guest Cat by Takashi Hiraide. Very sorry to the people of Japan for how I just pronounced that name. The Guest Cat was a very quick and easy read, and it basically tells the story of how a cat named Chibi begins to influence the lives of a Japanese couple in their 30s. There's also a lot about how Japanese society is changing, and in particularly like the housing market. It was such an adorable read. If you like cats, you need to read this book. You can read it in like a day, it's really quite short. I recently played a role in setting up a feminist book club at my university, and the first book we read for that was The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I've just returned it to the library. Well done, me. Resolutions. This was the only book I gave 5 stars to in the month, and I absolutely loved this book. I'm reading a lot of like dystopian things recently. Basically, the society in The Handmaid's Tale has a very high level of infertility. So reproduction becomes a massive priority for them, and women are split into sort of 4 groups. Handmaids, wives, martyrs I think they're called, and unwomen. Wives are married to commanders, which are powerful men, and handmaids are assigned to commanders. The purpose of handmaids is to reproduce with the commanders and then hand over a child to the wives once it's been born. My description of this novel will in no way do it justice, so I highly recommend that you read it, especially if you are in any way interested in feminist literature at all. It raises so many interesting questions about feminism and motherhood, and it's just such a good book. The final book I completed in January was William Shakespeare's Star Wars by Ian Doescher. I've not come across these books before. They are a retelling of the Star Wars episodes, but in like Shakespearean English, and they are retold like a play. Very mixed feelings on this. I absolutely flew through the first act. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was really, really funny, but after a while it did sort of lose my interest. The novelty of it kind of wore off. It's possibly because I'm not a massive Star Wars fan. Maybe if I was, I'd enjoy it a little bit more. When I was enjoying it, when the novelty hadn't worn off, it was very funny. And there are illustrations, which will always help. Finally, a book I am only halfway through because I got distracted by The Secret Garden after I started it, is The Hound of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle, obviously part of the Sherlock Holmes stories. This is a reread. I think I read this when I was about 15 and I kind of wanted to refresh my Sherlock reading. This was relatively short as well, but as I said, I got distracted halfway through and will finish it today. Really love the Sherlock books. I think they're really good. I have a lot of really nice and really critical feelings about Sherlock. I might do a whole video on it at some point because there are too many to fit in this little section of what is going to be a very long video anyway. I'm sure most of you have read this already, so it doesn't need much explanation. Yeah, I read 13 and a half books in January, which is a bit insane. I think that puts me like 20-something% through my Goodreads reading challenge. It's something like 9 books ahead of schedule. That does tempt me to expand my challenge, but I do have a lot of big university reads coming up and essays and things, so my reading will probably slow down quite a lot. This was in part helped by the fact I read a lot of children's books in January as well. So yeah, a pretty great month for my reading. Let me know if you read any of these books. Let me know if you want to read any of these books and I can tell you more about what I thought about them. Do not expect as many books in February, not one bit.